Hello, class. Okay, let's talk about narrative research. Okay, so now, as we know, this is another type of qualitative research. If you go back to your notes and previous sessions, we talked about the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. Both good methods, good systems for data collection and to be able to understand a school or a session or whatever it is that you're studying. And but sometimes some people think a little bit better with do better with qualitative. Some prefer quantitative, and so this is one of the qualitative methods that we're gonna be doing studying here. Okay, so talk about what does this entail. Okay, what is the definition of narrative research? Okay, narrative research, the definition is the study of how different human experiences the different humans experience the world around them, and it involves a methodology that allows people to tell their stories, of their lived stories, such as a collection of stories that make up one's life. And so this is really what we're looking at. This methodology comes out of anthropology, where anthropologists, 40 or 50 years ago, the way that they understood society was going in and studying a particular culture, becoming one with the culture, and really being able to study the language, the behavior, the culture, to be able to tell the world, the existence of these cultures and the uniqueness of these cultures. So that's really what we're looking at. That's narrative research here. Purpose is to collect, analyze, interpret narratives and visual data in order to gain insight into a particular phenomenon of interest. It involves the collaborative construction of a narrative about an individual's experience and the meanings that they attribute to their experience. Okay, so maybe I can tell you a little bit about a study that I'm presently doing. I'm trying to study how whether this is here in the city of Fresno, whether this workforce development program, why is it that they don't have enough students of color, and these programs prepare students for the construction fields. Why is it that we don't have a lot of people of color in the construction fields, particularly the unionized jobs, right? If this is a gateway, these programs are a gateway to these union jobs. Why isn't a lot of people? Why aren't a lot of people in this? So we want to know, whether racism exists, what type of experiences people of color have in those programs, women, of course, as well. And so we're doing a survey, right? We want to send a survey to everybody, but we don't feel confident enough that the survey is going to give us the real experiences that we're going to be able to report back to this program for different ways for them to change their curriculum or their marketing or what have you. And so generally what we're going to do is we're going to also go in there and do interviews, focus groups, to make sure that we collect the stories of people and the stories that they tell us as they were in those programs, and as they're in the construction field after those programs, to see if we were able to find the things that we're looking for of why is it that there's not a lot of diversity in these programs. Okay, and so we're using narrative research for that. These are the types of narrative research. As you know, there's quite a bit. I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of the ones that I do use quite a bit is almost towards the bottom is autoethnography. Right, I used that one early on in my career because, okay, I have an experience as a person of color, maybe perhaps, being at the university or doing certain things at the university, that I want to tell that story. And I want to tell it from my point of view. And hopefully this story will help others as they maybe try to navigate some of the same things that I navigated. And so I used to use a lot of autoethnographies and also, to do some of the work, right? And if you search the word autoethnography, you'll find a lot of research and a lot of people, and all of it is qualitative. Rarely do people give themselves a survey. Generally, they do a self-interview, or they do an interview with a colleague or things like that, right? Rarely ever are you going to collect quantitative data on this. So the difference between all of these really depends on who authored the research, right? Are you a researcher or a participant or both, right? As I said in autoethnography, what is the scope of the narrative, right? Is it an entire life? Is it an episode in one's life? If you're looking at high school students, is it their whole academic journey? Is it just their 11th grade year? What is it? Who provided the story, right? Is it provided by a teacher, a student, a counselor, an administrator? And then also, what is the theoretical framework that has influenced the study? Was it critical race theory, feminist theory? Was it, Marxist theory? What was it? What is helping to inform the study? And really the theoretical framework is, what is the lens? If you put on these pair of glasses, you'll be able to look best, right? You put all these other ones and they have, the wrong amount of power, that they don't let you see as clear. Some of them help you see more clear than you could see without glasses, but there's only one pair that fits perfectly, right? Or that fits more perfect than all the others, right? Or maybe a couple of pairs, right? But one is really probably the closest one. That's really what a good way to look at a theoretical framework, right? If the story that I told you about with the workforce development, if everybody was saying racism exists, it's rampant, it's in the field, it's in the training programs, it's everywhere. If that was the case, then yeah, I would probably use critical race theory as a framework to be able to frame those studies. Critical race theory would provide me a lens to say, okay, what am I supposed to be looking for when I look for racism in a particular program or in a particular field? How do I look at that and make sure that I don't underplay or underwrite those stories of racism, that I really take them for the power that they're providing? Okay. And then also whether or not any of these are included in one of the narratives is going to be key. So, okay. All right. So there are two different things here to look at, two different ways to go about setting up your own narrative, narrative study, right? The first one is narrative analysis. And here the research collects description of events through interviews, observations, focus groups, what have you. They synthesize them into a story. And in this type, the story is the outcome of the research and an attempt to answer how and why a particular outcome came about. Then you have analysis of narrative. This process involves a researcher collecting stories, analyzing them to produce a description of themes that apply to all of the stories and captures, all of the different narratives. Using this approach, the researcher develops a statement or themes as general knowledge about the collection of the stories, but in doing so emphasizes a unique aspect of each story. But really, we're looking at the complexity of stories. And these two may sort of overshadow a little bit, but really, it's really an important perspective to understand how it is that you're going to go about viewing your own narrative research. Okay. So the process is you identify the purpose of the study, right? Why are you doing this study, right? So, the first one is the workforce study. Why am I doing that study? I'm doing it because I'm very interested if racism exists in the construction fields, because, we believe in equality and equal opportunity. And besides, the programs need more people. There's not enough people of color. The majority of the people in the city that would be interested in those jobs are people of color, because that's the majority. And these programs will not survive if they don't diversify in some way, shape, or form, right? We want those programs to survive. We want them to keep going. We want them to provide, tradespeople that are going to help develop our city, right? And so then you identify the phenomenon that you're going to explore. You select an individual to learn about this phenomenon, one or maybe multiple individuals, right? The only way this study where I would select one individual is maybe if I selected a person who has been through the program several times, maybe has gotten, has belonged to maybe several, different trade unions, somebody that had 20, 30 years experience, that was, that had so much knowledge beyond what anybody else could provide me. I may select that individual and focus my study around that individual person. Or then you pose an initial narrative research question, and you describe the role of the researcher, right? Are you going to be more participatory? Are you going to be sort of, not as participatory? Are you going to be active, inactive as your participation? You describe the data collection methods that you're going to use, paying particular attention to interviewing, right? You collaborate with the research participant to construct the narrative and to validate the accuracy of the story. Generally, you do this through member checks. I think we've talked about member checks when you transcribe the story and you send it back to the participants so that they can give one last check to so that they know what they said and see if they want to change their mind, or we captured some details wrong, any of those type of things. It increases the validity and the accuracy of the story. And then you do the complete writing of the narrative. Okay. Techniques is you have empirical data is very central to narrative research in spite of the inevitable interpretation that occurs during data collection process, because during the data collection, there is going to be interpretation. You have to make a lot of decisions of how it is that you're going to tell a particular story, right? But nevertheless, don't ever forget that, any type of data that you have that is quantitative or empirical, that can also help shape and tell a better story than what you originally planned to do without that. Interpretation alone does not make for fiction as an outcome of the process, right? Narrative researchers must be prepared to use multiple data sources to counter challenges that narratives could only be written without ever leaving home, right? What does multiple sources of data mean? It may mean that you don't only do, an autoethnography, but you also maybe do a survey, or, you may do an interview, or you may, talk to different people, right? And so that's what that means, really. Narrative research relies on triangulation of data to address issues of trustworthiness. You want to make sure that it's trusted. If your research is trusted, triangulation means you should collect at least 3 different types of data. It might not just be interview data. It may also be maybe survey data. It may be focus group data. It may be other types of data, okay? And trustworthiness is really a term that is used to describe the validity in qualitative research, not in quantitative, okay? Because in quantitative, we have the term generalizability. We want to make sure that our study is generalized to other populations. In qualitative, you have the word trustworthiness. And if you all want to look more further into this term, I would put it into AI, ask AI, what does trustworthiness mean for qualitative research? See what it says. Okay. And then some techniques are credibility, where you have, complexity and problems that are not easily explained. Transferability, right? Where how does this study also apply to other similar settings? Dependability, right? How stable was the data collected? How much trust can we have in that data? Confirmability is the neutrality and objectivity of the data, right? Can we, confirm it, with maybe other types of data? And then you have triangulation, right? Where you collect multiple types of data to make sure that they're all telling pretty much the same story, okay? Restoring, this is one of the techniques in narrative, right? Where with each interview, the researcher records the recollections. They amass many pages of raw data. That's the transcription. Transcription is called raw data, okay? The notes contain interesting stories and details, but they don't constitute a narrative of the participants' experiences. You still have to maybe move around. Maybe participants don't talk in a linear manner. Maybe they jump around. It's your job to take those stories and put them maybe in a chronological or a linear order, so they were able to more clearly understand that story. So the 3 stages of restoring are conducting interviews, transcribing the data, obtaining raw data, retranscribing it again for key elements of the story, identifying themes, organizing the story in a chronological sequence with attention to setting, character, actions, problems, and resolutions. After these 3 stages are complete, the participants are able to ask and collaborate with the researcher to write the final story narrative. Don't be afraid to use your participants to check your story as you're writing it for reliability, confirmability, correctness. Okay, the second technique is oral history. And this is obtained during a structured or a semi-structured interview. Remember we talked about structured, unstructured, and semi-structured? This is really for structured and unstructured, where the participants tell their own story in their own way. They supplement it with photographs, memory boxes, yearbooks, etc. Another technique is examining photos, memory boxes, other artifacts, yearbooks, photo archives, photo albums, etc. I don't know, maybe just because of your age, but I still back in my day, I took a lot of pictures where you had to go and take your pictures to get developed, and you have the physical copy of the picture. I still have thousands of pictures of my experiences with my family and such, and I have them all in big photo albums. I never look at them. The ones I look at are the ones that are digital, but nevertheless, I still have those old ones there. Maybe at some point I'd want to digitize them and maybe write an autoethnography about it. So you have storytelling, where you're encouraging a day in the life of a particular participant as a regular part of the research process that will really provide a wealth of information. This is really asked. I watch a lot of, I follow women's cross country at the high school level and at the college level pretty closely, only because my daughter is a cross country runner. And so always when I watch these stories of these famous women runners who do amazing things, that's one of the questions they always ask. Take me through a day in your life. What happens when you get up in the morning, all the way till you sleep at night? What does your day look like? What do you eat? How do you train? Give me all the details, And so that's the storytelling that goes in the day of a life. Letter writing with email being another way to really engage participants, to maybe post questions through email and have them respond via email. And nowadays, I'm as much texting as I am on the actual phone. And so for me, this would be a good way to get, the actual, the text data, even though I do make a lot of mistakes when I text. I'm a very heavy texter. Okay. You have autobiographical or biographical sketches, where one of the keys to the narrative research is to engage participants in writing activities, writing their stories, writing their biographies. It's useful, really, if you're trying to get, capture the story very accurately. And it can be done by, individuals telling their story, or maybe even collaborating with the researcher on telling the story. Okay, and then others maybe lesson plans, newsletters, etc. Okay, writing the narrative. This is the final step. You got to write it, right? You've done all the research, you've designed the study, you collected the data, you analyzed it. Now you got to write it. Okay. This could be done by yourself, or it could be done in collaboration with your participant or participants. The main goal is really to learn the general from the particular. And this here is used a lot, like for, the presidential biographies, right? Right now, I don't know if you all knew that Joe Biden was writing a book, right? Well, he's kind of elderly. I don't know if you've noticed, but he can't really probably write a book. Well, they have professional people that go to his house and do as much as he can, stay up to interview. They may do 3, 4, or 5 hours of interviewing per day. They probably have hundreds of questions, and all of that they're going to use to write his story as though he wrote it. And they'll probably read it back to him, or have him read it, or put it in an audiobook so that he can listen to it before they publish it, just to make sure that that story is accurate. So it's an elaborate process. Probably takes, a year to go through that process. And then Joe Biden is still his story. He's still going to be the author. The people who wrote it are just the ghostwriters or whatever, that they're just the kind of like the worker bees that are telling that story. But that's sort of very common, and that process is very common for those type of stories, such as presidential biographies. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.